Oh, and we are live. So, welcome to Hockey Nation and Pucks and Dreams fans. Today, we have another special guest, which is my friend Mike Fraser. And Mike is the head scout of our very own Everett Silvertips. Mike, I'm glad we finally got to connect and join.
Yeah, I know we were playing a bit of tag there, but I appreciate you having me on and looking forward to it.
All right. So, you've been, is it 4 years now or 3 with Everett?
If this counts as a year, this is number 3.
So, for people that don't know, Everett Silvertips are in the WHL, and we're part of the Canadian Hockey League. And what's been going on this year? Not much, right?
Yeah, it's crazy to think that how long this has been, and I know these are the most cliche comments ever when it comes to the pandemic, but we're at 13 plus months now, and I've said this to a couple people over this, that I've been involved in hockey in some degree, whether it's a player, coach, or a scout, since I was 6 years old. And in the last 13 months, I can count on one hand how many times I've actually been physically in an arena.
Oh my goodness.
So
I don't feel so bad now.
Yeah. So it's been a little tough to get used to. It's nice to have some things going, and tried to watch some stuff online and everything else with the Western Hockey League and some of the minor hockey going on in the US, but it's a challenge for sure.
All right. So for those that are uninitiated, what is a head scout?
That's a good question. I think there's probably a lot of different ways you could define it, but I think for the most part in the Western Hockey League, it's probably the person that's in charge of getting your team prepared for the Bantam Draft, and trying to follow along those prospects and everything else and how they're developing afterwards. Obviously, and I know you've talked a bit about it in the past, but on your programs, but the Bantam Draft's a pretty big deal for the scouts, and something we kind of gear towards all year and put all of our work together. And basically what I try to do is, in general, try and get out and see as many players as I can. So, and I'm based in Edmonton, so it's a good place to be, I think, for a head scout, because you're right by an international airport. There's lots of hockey that even comes here, or Calgary, which isn't too far down the road. It's pretty easy spot to get into the US to watch some stuff as well. So we've got a handful of guys in Western Canada and in the US like yourself, that help me out big time. And I try and gather everything that everybody reports on throughout the year, including the stuff that I do myself, and formulate a list and bring it all together for a draft. So it's a lot of work, but it's fun, and I've really enjoyed. It's been a great way to stay involved with the game and meet a lot of people, and it's really been a lot of my social life too. So which is another reason why the pandemic's been tough. Missing a lot of the guys that I often see out there. So it's been a good experience, and it's obviously being with Everett, I've learned a lot from all the scouts. Gary, our GM, and Alvin, our director of player personnel. They've taught me a lot, and they've kept me in touch with everything, even through this year. And so it's nice to still stay involved, even though it feels like I'm on this couch more than I want to be.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's definitely been weird. Like I haven't been able to see nearly as much hockey. Like I just went on my own dime to go to Arizona to see people, because it was like, well, I'm never going to see these guys otherwise. And there's certain states here they're at least playing. What's happening in Edmonton? Are they allowed to play, or?
No, it's pretty shut down, really, in most of Western Canada. I know some places I think you can still have practices and things like that, but in terms of games, there's really been, outside of the Western League and a little bit of the Junior A leagues in some of the provinces, which are pretty tough to get into right now as well. It's been pretty quiet. So there was a little bit early on, September, October, kind of before, I guess, the second wave hit with COVID. And, I was able to see Boy, I think I saw maybe 7 or 8 games total.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Like,
before they got shut down, everything else I've done has been pretty much online. So
wow.
it's
How
been
many
tough.
games would you say you normally see? I'm trying to think of how many I would see. Maybe
How
8.
many games did you say?
Yeah, how many would you normally see?
I think last year was hovering around 500 games. Now that's been,
That many?
yeah, I think I
Wow,
mean,
that's
it's in pieces, right? Because you're at tournaments and you're kind of
makes
jumping around
sense.
the rinks sometimes, but it's a lot. So to go from that many to 7 or 8 is a pretty big change. So
That's a big change. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of how many games would I see? Would I see 80 or 100 maybe? Because
yeah,
I have to fly away a lot.
yeah, yeah. It's a lot, and it's again, I enjoy it, and I'm fortunate that I do work another job that gives me the flexibility to allow me to do it as well, which is a big help. So, in normal times, there's a lot of weekends where I have to sneak away on a Friday or even a Thursday, Friday to head out to BC or to head out to the US or Manitoba or wherever. So it's definitely a commitment, but you realize when you go through something like this how much you miss it, because sometimes it feels a little bit overwhelming when you got two things going, like 2 jobs going on. But then
Right.
now I would do anything to have it around. So
You definitely, I mean, I know I have that feeling when I go in the rink. It's like, yeah, I'm where I'm supposed to be. It's like, this is where I'm supposed to be, not outside.
yeah, and I think when it really kicks in or stands out more for me is when you get to Thursday, Friday of the work week, and you're kind of going, all right, what's coming up this weekend, and then you kind of realize it's almost Groundhog Day all over again. So that part of it's bizarre. Friday nights coming home and finding a game on the computer versus going to a rink has definitely been a change. I mean, maybe I'm a little more used to it now, but it's not something I really want to get used to. So,
Do you find, I mean, I know what I think, but for you, do you find it's tough to get the same feel for players on video?
100%. And I think there's two sides of that, I think, because it's number one is that the point you just made. But number two is that I do think it's definitely a tool that maybe myself personally I didn't use enough before this. So even hopefully when we get out of this and have a little bit of normalcy back, and there's so many different programs and stuff out there now that are so good with that type of thing. And I've learned a lot about a couple of them here over the last year. I'll definitely be using that more going forward, and it's kind of nice for me to have that. Not to speak selfishly, but I can't be everywhere at once. So
That's true.
if I've only seen a player 1 or 2 times, it's kind of nice to get those extra viewings of them, even if it has to be on a laptop or on my TV at home or whatever, just to get a little more, reading some of your guys' reports and get a little better feel for the player. So
I never go through. I mean,
yeah.
you figure a software that works better.
Yeah. So,
God, I've lost my report so many times. It's ridiculous. Like, I'm just going to send you a spreadsheet. Give up.
Well, the more information, the better. I never, I actually enjoy. Last night, I was actually reading some of the reports that Gary had been putting in through some of the games he's been seeing, and I actually enjoy reading everybody's reports. It's especially once you get to know the players a little bit more and a little more on who they're talking about, as the season goes on. So I enjoy that aspect of it.
All right, now, so before Everett, what were some of the roles that you had in major, junior, or otherwise?
Yeah, I was. So this would be my, I guess, 16th year of scouting overall. Just my 3rd as a head scout. Before this, I worked 6 years with the Brandon Wheat Kings in the Western League, kind of my hometown team. That's where I'm from originally. And I started scouting actually with Swift Current Broncos back in, I think it was 2005.
Oh, wow.
And I worked with them for 7 years, and kind of they started to increase my role a little bit more and more. And then, long story short, I was moving actually from Manitoba to Edmonton and Brandon was looking for a guy that was wanting to get into it a little more and do a little more travel, and that turned out to be a good position for me because I got to learn a lot about, more about the head scouting position, as I was with our head scout a fair amount in those 6 years, and just a little more about the traveling and what exactly it is to be a head scout. So yeah, it's been 16 years. It's been a lot of airplanes. It's been a lot of miles on the vehicle, but worth every penny.
All right. So we mentioned the Bantam Draft. That's basically 14-year-olds that we're drafting.
Yeah.
Who are some of the guys that you've been able to see at that age that are now, kind of moved on, or that you were excited about that turned out to be people that we would probably know out in the real world?
Well, I think
our world,
probably the one that stands out the most, and not because really of anything other than the sense that my very first draft was Swift Current. I was living in Brandon at the time, and our first round pick was Cody Eakin.
Oh yeah,
who's had a pretty good NHL career still going.
Buffalo.
He's with Buffalo right now. But yeah, he was, and he's from Winnipeg originally, so I got to see him quite a bit, got to know his family a little bit, and so that was kind of neat just to see him progress and move up the ranks and everything else. Some of the other guys, boy, there's been lots, and I don't mean that just from the guys that we've drafted. I mean, it's nice to see. You and I were talking just before we came on here. I like watching the guys in the NHL or other leagues that have played in our league. Just how they progressed, and especially the ones that a little bit off the ice, and how they've succeeded in the game, and just as exciting as when you get, I still keep in touch with some guys, that have turned into the business world and become very successful in that sense. But yeah, some of the players, Cody Eakin, I think probably Nolan Patrick.
Oh, right.
Would be a name that a lot of your viewers would be familiar with.
Second overall draft pick.
Yeah.
And hopefully he gets, stays healthy long enough to realize.
Yeah, and it's been nice to see him get back kind of playing here again this year. It's been a rough couple of years for him, but he seems to have a little more of a, steady role and been able to stay a little healthier this year. So Philly's had a crazy year.
Philly's weird. I think there's too many coaches on the bench.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like, our old goalie's there, and I've never seen him struggle like this.
Yeah, it's bizarre because I mean, you never want to jump to conclusions, but I mean, the first 10 or 12 games of the year, you're kind of looking, going, wow, these guys might be a cup favorite.
They were 10 games up at one point.
And now
they're struggling. They're out.
Standings in front of me, but they're probably in tough to make playoffs, I think. So,
I mean, they mathematically they're there, but I mean, there's something missing. They got blown out last night, like 6-1.
Yeah, that's the, and I don't watch a ton of the U.S. because there's so much Canadian coverage up here.
Sure, yeah.
I could watch a little bit more of the U.S. teams, but it is that your 6-1 point was something I was thinking about last night. Is that it's not like they're losing a lot of tight games. They're getting it handed to them a little bit. So
for the number of coaches they got, man, they should have the tightest team in the league. Yeah. They got Therrien, they got Vigneault, and they got Mcgill.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and it's been interesting watching how some of these teams handle COVID and pandemic and no fans and all the protocols they have to follow, which, it's great to have hockey on, especially, for us.
For sure.
Something to watch on TV for sure. But it's got to be tough, with families and you're trying to follow all the rules that you're supposed to follow, and it seems to differ in province to province and state to state, and so it's not just bizarre for Western Hockey League and everything else. Like even the teams and the leagues that are going, it's not easy on them. I could definitely see it wearing on you after a while, but they can probably see the
whole thing last year in the playoffs, and then now you're like semi-able, like oh, you're in, you're out. It's got to be crazy.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how they do it. They may have to do a bubble again.
I think they're gonna have to.
Yeah, it's gonna be a challenge. I mean, it's
so wacky.
It's the rollout is slow up here on the vaccination side, so it's
crazy. Now, Brandon, when you were you there for the WHL championship?
Yes, 2016 we won the championship. That was pretty exciting. It was, a lot of hard work was into that from everyone, and it was a pretty solid team. A lot of good players there. Nolan Patrick's one, Kale Clague, John Quinville, Jace Howerluck, some of the guys that have had some time in the NHL. It was a good group, and it kind of started, I think, the year before in 2015. They had made it to the league final and lost to Kelowna, but I think that was a real good experience for them. And I think when I look back on it, I believe our record was actually better in 2015 than it was in 2016.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I think we were more prepared in 2016 for the grind and what the playoffs were going to be like. So it was 2016 group. Obviously, I'm not around them, so I don't know them as close as other guys do. But from what I've heard and been relayed from the coaching staff and some of the other guys over the years, it was a pretty tight-knit group. And I always found it interesting with that group was that there was a lot of talk of trades and everything else at the trade deadline that year. And this is just my personal opinion, but I think it was more the trades that we didn't make that ended up helping us in the end. There was a couple of smaller, quote unquote, smaller additions that we made, and that turned out to be very, very big. And it was pretty exciting. I was actually fortunate enough too. I was living here, but I was fortunate enough to get back to Brandon for the first couple games of that series. So, and then just as a side note, I was in Las Vegas the night that we won. So it was.
Oh, really? Oh my God! What's there is that Kelly McCrimmon went to Vegas. Speaking of Vegas, right?
Yeah, he was there. He went there. Was it the next year or the year after?
Yep, next year.
But yeah, it was a fun group, and we kind of had seen, when I started there, they were right in pretty much the start of a rebuild. So it was nice to see the culmination of that, and still had even a couple good years after that with some players, but and it kind of looks like they're headed in the right direction here again with some of the players they have right now. So are
they pretty good right now?
Yeah, they've had a pretty good run there in the Regina bubble, and it's nice to see. Obviously, I know a lot of the guys there, and Darren Ritchie and I have gotten along for years and known each other for a long time. So I'm happy for him and the success he's been having.
So, we've been basically playing 4 other teams. Have you caught many of the games?
Yeah, we've played 12. I've probably watched 6 or 7 full games and then other pieces here and there. I think we've had a pretty good run. We've had a little bit of a blip here the last couple of games, but
a little bit, yeah.
Overall, I think Gary's been pretty happy with, and Coach Williams there has been pretty happy with how they've played. So,
who are some of the guys you're kind of excited about now you get to see him?
Yeah, well, the one you have up there, Ben Hammerling, he's, for me, it's kind of a selfish look. He was our first pick as my first year as a head scout. So,
oh, that's right.
And again, he's from this area too, so I know the family quite well, and very awesome people, amazing people, and it's nice to see him. I thought he's played very well. The Western League can be very tough for 16-year-olds.
Right. Yeah. He's grown quite a bit. Cause I think when we first saw him, he was like 5'1", maybe, right?
Yeah, he
was pretty small.
He sprouted up a little bit. He was. I can't remember what it was at training camp. The first one, I think it was about.
It was crazy.
4 or something, but
yeah, maybe.
But yeah,
I measured the guys. I don't know about that.
He's grown up, and he's very mature young man, and I know in speaking with Gary, I just spoke with Gary actually on last weekend, and he's been very happy with his progress. And it's always tough. It's the 16-year-old argument in our league is always it's always, do you keep them and let them get the experience, and you're always concerned, are they going to play enough and everything else, or let them go back, to their U18 programs or whatever it might be, and let them be the star of the show a little bit. So, but he, I know in our discussions that towards the end of last season, right around when COVID hit, I know we were pretty confident that he could probably jump into it here, and it looks like he's fit in just fine and picked up a few points and a couple goals, so I'm happy for him.
Who are some of the other guys on our roster that you're excited about and you got to see?
Yeah, I think the one guy that I think was a very good list, and a lot of our BC guys, our BC scouts, had seen him throughout the year, and Alvin as well, that Ryan Hofer, who's actually a Manitoban. Some people will be familiar with his brother, was a goaltender for Team Canada at the World Juniors about a year and a half ago. I got to see him late, right actually before everything got shut down last year, and was really impressed. He really gritty player, but he can put the puck in front of the net. He's not afraid of anything. He's got nice size to him, and very good, well-mannered. I always say kid. I shouldn't say kid, but
still a kid, man. I don't know. Like I still say Ryan O'Reilly is such a nice kid, and I realize he's got kids.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, he's not 15 anymore.
Yeah. So I think he might be too. Hofer might be a little bit of a good example of a later bloomer.
Right. He's 02, isn't he? Yeah, 02.
Yeah, I think by the time he's a 19, 20-year-old, he's going to be a real effective guy for us. So that was a good pickup. And that's one thing I've always had a lot of respect with Everett, even well before I joined, is the scouting group has done a really good job of adding players after the draft. I know we talked about the draft, but it's important to do your follow-up and watch those teams and players as they go into the U16, U17, U18, because everybody seems to develop differently, and there's been guys that aren't even on your radar by the time the Bantam Draft comes around, and then by the time they're 18, 19, they're very good players in our league. So it's just the way things work, and that's why you have to keep watching everything, because you don't want to miss anything. And I really have a lot of respect for what Everett's done over the years with adding players after the fact and having them become key players on the roster. So
how's Sutter doing? Aiden Sutter.
Yeah, I think he's improved. Gary actually mentioned him the other night to me, and he's improved quite a bit. And I think his skating and he's really kind of adapted to the pace and level now. The one interesting thing then with our defense now is you've got with Zellweger now getting ready to go to Texas for the U18 World U18s. It's going to give some of these guys a little bit more chance to shine too. Sutter, the Ty Gibsons, Van Herk, all those type of players. So it's and this is the season, I think, to do that. And obviously you want to win and have success, but I think in a 24-game season when you're dealing with all the stuff going on around us, and I think it's important to focus on the development of these kids and get them as much ice time as they can and a chance to play. Because, I mean, you and I, we've seen how much Zellweger's come in a very short amount of time.
God. Even just the first time we saw him to the second camp.
Yeah.
He took it very seriously. And I remember not knowing, was this guy going to sign with us even? I wasn't quite sure, I think it took a little bit of convincing. And he was pretty small. He was maybe $140, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next year he came in, you're like, is that Olin? he was like, yeah, I'm ready. I'm 180 or 175.
Yeah, he's Gary talks a lot to me about how dedicated he is
Oh my goodness, that was really interesting.
From the rink. So and it's an interesting point. I know Alvin's brought it up with me a couple times where, again, I don't have the exact number, but I think there was something like 18 or 19 defensemen drafted before him.
Right, because it was he second or third round?
I believe it was a second.
Oh yeah, right here. Hold on. Yeah, 42nd. So second round. So did we even have a first that year? I think we traded away a lot of firsts.
No. Yeah, you didn't have a first.
Once again, no first round. I mean, I think that was the thing that came to my mind actually, which is, again, like I think Gary's made really aggressive, astute moves. It's unfortunate the last 2 years we kind of can't compete for the Memorial Cup or a championship. But credit to you and the scouting staff for everyone finding talent deep into the draft, because sometimes we're not picking to the second or the third round. Usually.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, I think everybody deserves credit for that, and I'm fairly new to the group, but there's some guys that have been around a long time that understand Gary's philosophy and how he does things and how he believes in players. And it is unfortunate, and this is meant as no disrespect to any other team in the league, but I really think that Everett probably missed out on 2 seasons here where, you could have been a legit contender, and for sure there's probably 5 or 6 more of those around the league. Like I said, I'm not disrespecting anyone else, but
no, we had a legit shot. I mean, we were like 5th or 6th in the country last year.
Yeah, I think us and Portland there were fighting pretty close tooth and nail most of the season in the division and right around the top of the league, and it was tough. It was tough feel bad for the players, that especially when it happened last year, when it was so, we only had a handful of games before playoffs were about to start.
Yeah, 4 or 5, wasn't it?
Yeah, I never got a chance to see that play out. So
bummer. That was really disappointing.
But yeah, and to your point, it goes back to the importance of having a scouting staff that you can trust and that will do the work, because there's players to see after the Bantam Draft that weren't drafted. So and Everett's done a good job with that over the years, and I think probably we'll keep doing a good job of that if we can ever get back on the ice again.
Well, it's, I think this will be the most challenging year probably, right? I mean, we don't pick until I think the 3rd round, and then you haven't been able to see anybody.
Yeah, and it was a little unnerving for a while there, because you weren't sure if the draft was going to happen, around this time like it usually does, April, May, and once we got, I can't remember when the decision was made. I think it was maybe around December, but when we were getting into November and December, and you realize you've only seen a handful of the 06s, which would be the draft this coming season. It's a little unnerving, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to make it work and everything else. But with the draft being pushed back to December, it helps a little bit. But in the same breath, we're already in April and still haven't been able to see a whole lot. So
Are we going to be doing both years, like 06 and 07?
As far as I know, it's going to be December for the 06s and May for the 07s.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So
it'll go back to regular after that, basically. Yeah. We'll just get a reprieve of to see them a little bit at the beginning. Well, most of next year, really.
It'll just be a lot of hockey over a
short
13-month period. Shorter, really, when
short, just compressed.
Going. It's interesting to see some of the, you're seeing some camps. I'm not sure what it's like down there, but you're seeing some camps pop up here in Western Canada this summer that you never seen before, just because, everybody wants to get in on it and try to get seen and everything else. So I've already been trying to plan a little bit of that, but it's, even at this point in the middle of April, it's still hard to plan for, because you're just, we're pretty much in a 3rd wave right now of COVID. And so
interesting. All right. So for people out there that are maybe coaches.
I was just going to say there's a camp schedule close to Edmonton here actually on May long weekend.
Oh, there is.
But, as of right now, the way the restrictions are, it wouldn't be able to happen. So you just have to wait and see with so many things in life right now.
You have to sneak over to Dallas.
Yeah.
When is the Dallas camp? Is that this weekend or next weekend?
I can't remember offhand. I think it's next weekend.
I might be there. I'm gonna check because we have a place in Austin. I could probably go. Let's see. The World, right? World under 18.
Yeah.
Let's take a. Oh, well, is this it? Comerica? No. Is it in Frisco?
I don't even know what part. I just knew Dallas, so well, that might be it there. Yeah.
Frisco and Plano. You know what? I might be there. I think I'm there. So we have a place in Austin, so I'll have to. I might go check that out. But if they let me, I don't know if they'll even let me in the building. Oh no, it's Dallas. They'll let me in. There's no masks in Dallas or anything.
Yeah, Texas has a little different rules than we got up here.
Cole a beast. Who's Cole? Cole Fonstad? Which Cole are you talking about, Miles? I'm not sure. I wonder which Cole it is. All right. So for maybe guys that are coaches or thinking of scouting, what are some of the things that you look for to evaluate players?
Well, I think the generic answer is probably similar for a lot of guys. Your skills, your skating and hockey sense and all that. And I mean, sometimes I feel like there's a tendency to people to overthink that, myself included. I 16 years doing this, I still learn a ton every year, and I think that's important. I think that's, I think if you take the mentality of, well, I've done this long enough, I know what I'm looking for type thing, then that's probably when you become a little bit complacent. So. Right. And especially that's the one thing I've really taken from moving from, starting with Swift Current, going to Brandon, coming to Everett, is you take a little bit from everywhere that you go and use that to your advantage, because I've been pretty lucky to work with some pretty good people over the years in both of those organizations. So the one thing I found with Everett is there's a real emphasis on skill, and I know that sounds obvious, but the speed and the skill factor is such an important part of the game now, because the game is so quick and so fast, and Everett's done a very good job of adding these players that play that way, and Willie coaches those guys so well to play within his system. So it's a good philosophy. It's worked very well. I feel since Gary's taken over, and really I really think for the most part that's the generalizing it, but trying to put kids in order when you're talking about, I don't know, anywhere from 150 to 300 kids depending on the year is not an easy task, which is why it's great to have everybody to contribute and add in their 2 cents and everything else. So it's a lot of work doing that and putting it all together. And again, I think my time, especially with Brandon, when I was doing a lot more travel and being around our head scout a lot more there, it really taught me how to get ready for the draft and how to not just evaluate players, but put them on a list to try and rank them and go from there. Like looking at your needs and stuff on your depth chart and things like that. So I don't know that there's any one definition of what a scout is or what a scout should look for, as I think it really differs from organization to organization. But the one key thing that I think is important to remember is, as obvious as it sounds, is you have to go to the rink. And sometimes that can be tough. It can be, a lot of the scouts in our league, they're not getting paid a whole lot. They're doing it for the love of the game, and but they work their butts off. And those are the ones that tend to know the players, know the age groups a lot better. They're able to contribute a lot more, and it's such an important piece. And you get home from work after 10-hour day on a Friday, you might not feel like heading to the rink and it's minus 25 outside or whatever. But
I don't have this issue.
Sometimes you just got to.
Is there a rink nearby? That's my new issue.
Yeah.
Like although I will say here in Anaheim, they do have a pretty cool rink, but there's not really the events yet. So it'd be interesting to see unless you want to see the junior Ducks every week, which you probably don't want to see. But yeah, it's definitely a different from living in Toronto. When I was in Toronto, it was like so much easier. You could sit there and you could watch like 10 games in a row and see legit players that were, going to be in the NHL someday, probably a bunch of them.
Yeah, and that's one of the nice things about living here too in Edmonton. Like Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver. Obviously, it's such a humongous area. There's, it's easy for anybody, any scout living here, for example, to on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, to probably catch 10 games if you wanted to. I actually, when I first moved here, I found myself trying to do everything and go to everything, but you also have to make sure you're limiting yourself in the sense that you don't want to overload your brain with too much information and wear yourself out. So a lot more picking and choosing probably over the last 5 years I've done. But it's still, it's very easy to see 2, 3, 4 games a day here on the weekends without having to go too far, which is one benefit. And Vancouver, Winnipeg, like those are all very key areas for our scouts in Western Canada, because there's so much of the hockey comes to you there.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. For the NHL, who are you excited about this year? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I think it's the North Division's been interesting because it's obviously all Canadian teams, but I think it's starting to spread out a little bit. But I think it's going to be, and I was having this conversation with my dad last night, it's just going to be a war in those first 2 rounds to see who gets out of that division.
God, yeah.
I like Toronto. Like, I think Toronto probably made the most impact at the deadline for the Canadian teams. But, like whether they end up playing Montreal or if Edmonton sneaks back or whatever it is, it's not going to be easy. So, and I can kind of see why teams didn't do too much at the deadline. I mean, obviously there's a lot of factors that play into that, salary cap and the COVID world we live in and everything else. But I think you could really put any of those 4 teams in the hat, and whichever one you pick out, pretty hard to argue that they could potentially be in the Final Four.
For me, I love, I think Hellebuck's probably one of the top 3 goalies in the NHL for me.
Yeah.
So I kind of lean on that a little bit, and you just never know when a Carey Price is going to decide, like, hey, I'm just going to win. Like when that switch goes off for guys like that once in a while, they can really kind of stick it to you. So that'll be curious to see.
Well, and Montreal is interesting in the sense that they really went on that slide there, and not everybody, but a lot of people wrote them off a little bit. And maybe that, it's hard to rate teams off in the NHL, period. But one thing that people kind of forgot about is during that slide that Montreal picked up a ton of points, ton of loser points, as we call them.
They did.
I think they had 9 or 10 OT losses or whatever. So they kind of hung around, even though they were, losing and dropping a little bit. And I think I said to somebody at the start of the year, 5-10 games in, I was like, well, that's the team to beat. Based on the games that I'd watched, they just seemed a little faster than everybody, and their offense was rolling pretty good then. But Edmonton, I see them lots, obviously living here, and when you have the 2 of the best players on the world on the team, they're pretty fun to watch, and they've done a pretty good job, I think, of finally adding a little more depth up front and on the back end too. So if Mike Smith can keep playing the way he's been playing, then they have a chance to come out of that division too. And then, like you said, Winnipeg, Hellebuck's one of the better goalies in the league. Maybe I don't know what Wheeler's status is, but maybe one of the deepest top 6 in the league. Not just.
He's only missed 3 games, but I thought he was.
I'm not sure if he's back now or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if they tell us or not, but he's he played April 5th, so that's been a while.
So yeah, I think that division is going to be a dogfight. I've watched a few of the Vegas Golden Knights games. They play a little bit up here, and I mentioned to you, I think just before we came on here, that I enjoy watching them because there's a lot of Western Canadian connections there, both on the ice and off the ice. And obviously my ex-boss is the GM there, so
Right.
Who I've known for a long time. So I enjoy watching them. I like their team. I think they're deep. I don't know if they have that. I don't know if they have the like the Nathan McKinnon type guy that Colorado has, but they're such a deep group, and obviously Fleury has been back to the Fleury that everybody
kind of. For a guy that people were like, oh, let's get rid of him just because they signed the other goalie.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, both their goalies have been pretty good, and I enjoy watching them. I find their brand of hockey is exciting. I think they create well, and it'll be interesting if they can kind of take that next step. But then you have the same problem, almost like in the Canadian division, where for them to just get to the Final Four, they got to try and get through the Colorados and the St. Louis's and it's going to be a war for sure.
Yeah, and St. Louis seems to have woken up a little bit. They had a little bit of a bad patch there. I think they were 0-6, and then they're 3-0. So I think they're adapting to having Tarasenko back, it seems like.
Yeah. And then you have the one team that nobody seems to talk about is Carolina, who's
what the hell, man? It's so crazy.
Yeah. So, and are they at the top of that division? They're very good. So,
yeah. Although it's funny, like Detroit beat them twice now.
Yeah.
Like, Detroit's kind of surprised. I think Detroit's slowly coming around a little bit. Like since beginning of March, they've been very competitive. I think they've been playing 500 for how horrible they were.
Yeah,
really smart, creative deals. Were you surprised with the Anthony Mantha deal?
Yeah, that was probably the one that came out of nowhere for me, and I think sounds like for most people. But I mean, it obviously sent a message of who's all in,
right? Like,
and rightfully so. I mean, they've had a strong year, and I think they're at the top of their division there too. So it's. I haven't seen a whole lot of their games, to be honest with you, but every time you look at the score,
somebody. What's funny is like, I mean, Niederreiter's having his every other year good year. Svechnikov really hasn't been at the level we would probably expect. Jordan Stahl's had a stupid good year. It's kind of crazy how that his. I don't know if you've watched this guy, Martin Neckesh. He's like so talented.
Yeah. And they've got a pretty good like assortment of scoring up front. It's not like they're just getting it from
Keon.
Yeah, like they're not just getting it from one or two guys. They're pretty spread out. So I kind of like that team. They're sort of sneakily hanging around the top of the league, and I really find, at least up here, you don't hear a whole lot about them. And actually, just as a side note there, the assistant coach for Carolina is Dean Chynoweth, who was actually the first guy I worked for in Swift Current, and
no way,
still keep in touch with him today.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, I
didn't realize he was there.
I'm happy for him that he's had some success there too.
So is it his dad or his granddad that's Ed?
His dad.
Is his dad okay?
Yeah. That the dad that the league trophy is named after, Western Hockey League trophy. So
I think they've fallen off a little bit lately, but Florida for me was a big surprise. And then the last 16 games, I don't know if you know, but Nashville's like 13 out of 16 they've won.
Well, yeah, and they went from maybe we're going to sell off some guys to getting back into it by the time the actual deadline came around. So
everyone's talking about Ekholm. I'm like, why would you trade this guy? Wait till Yossi comes back. You'll be fine. But yeah, honestly, they're way better than I thought. I'm not a huge fan of the coaching there, but I think they clued in, like, listen, Rene's a backup at this point. UC Saro, this is his team. He's healthy. Yossi's healthy. Johansson's healthy. And then they got, some kids that are coming up, like the Tolvanen guy is scoring like a lot. So it's great. Not a huge fan personally, but it's kind of funny to watch them.
Yeah, I wondered for a while if Chicago might be able to hang around there, but they're kind of in tough now, I think.
They are. I still think the goalie has like been a huge surprise. I mean, we were very critical of them in the offseason for, going ahead with Subban and, whatever bag of pucks was left over. But I don't think any of us saw Lankinen coming through. I mean, he's been terrific.
Yeah.
And then, when they announced Taves being gone, I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be a disaster, right?
Yeah, Taves gone, and then Kirby Dach was missed. I think he's only played about 6 or 7 games, maybe 2, since hurting his wrist there, or 9.
Yeah. He's. I mean, this kid. I don't know what you can tell people about him, but.
Well, I've seen him play since he was 12.
Oh, really? Okay.
So he was. He played his minor hockey in Fort Saskatchewan, which is about 35-minute drive from my place here. So he was playing Bantam hockey as a peewee, played up a level there, and even at age 12, he was putting up pretty decent numbers in the Alberta Bantam League, which is a pretty good league.
Oh,
so
okay. Yeah.
He was definitely on everybody's radar from not even a year before the draft, but even 2 years before. So
was he playing a year or two up?
When he was 12, he was playing like technically still a peewee, but he played Bantam that year.
Oh wow, okay.
And then 2 years of Bantam after that. But he was such a driver of the Fort Saskatchewan team's offense, and very, to some degree, he still hasn't fully grown into his body, but hadn't grown into his body obviously yet, just because he was so young. But even still, was very coordinated, very quick and shifty player that could make some plays, and his offensive vision was phenomenal, and not just in minor hockey, but obviously by the time he was playing in the Western League, just made such a huge difference every time he was on the ice. So he was pretty fun to watch. It's always neat when you get to see players like that. I always go back to my first year. I actually moved to Edmonton. The Bantam Draft class there was maybe one of the best classes I've seen, and a lot of it was pretty much in my backyard. You had, Sam Steele, Tyler Benson, Kale Clague, Nolan Patrick was playing in Winnipeg, but a lot of those guys were, I can't remember what the total was, but it was something like 6 or 7 Alberta kids there in the first 10 picks.
Oh, no way.
So there was a lot of good players. There was a lot of good players, a lot of good teams, and a lot of late nights watching playoff hockey, that went into 2 and 3 overtime. So that was pretty fun to watch. And it was an interesting year too, because it was, first off, it was the last year that Al McPherson was the head scout in Brandon. He was retiring. And Al, anybody that's been around Manitoba or the Wheat Kings, Al's a very, very well-known man with the Wheat Kings, and him and Kelly McCrimmon have been tight for years, and learned a lot from him, even just in the 1 year. And it was also before the time Kelly had gone back on the bench, so he was out in Alberta a lot, just because there was a lot of talent in that province that year. So it was neat to kind of be around them and just talk hockey and learn from them. And the one thing that I always appreciated with Kelly McCrimmon was that you could just sit down in a room with him and we could talk, kind of like you and I are doing right now, just talk about whatever. And he is such a good listener, and
really,
and also, like he's very in tune with what's going on. He's probably one of the smartest businessmen I've ever met, and one of the smartest hockey men. And he taught me a lot, and not surprising to me that Vegas has had the success that they've had since he joined join there. So
I think the biggest surprise for me was when, they had George McPhee, and then, they did so well. They kind of masterfully Ginsu knifed the expansion draft. And George McPhee stepped aside.
yeah. I think, and I don't know, I've never met George myself personally, but I think the interesting dynamic with McPhee was that he was really for a while there, and it's maybe a little different now, but he was really the only kind of Eastern guy that was involved, behind the scenes. There was a lot of, WHL or Western Canadian influence there and I'm not just talking from Kelly, like even some of the scouting staff and things like that. So, and as far as I know, I don't believe Kelly had much of a background with George before.
It didn't seem like there was a connection there, but
so I know he speaks very highly of him, and he himself was.
That's interesting you said that, because I was kind of like, did they even know each other before? Like,
yeah, I don't think there was much background there.
Okay, that was
also, I'm not sure how that all came together, but it was an interesting partnership, and obviously they've had very good success in their first 3-4 years.
Yeah, my buddy Steve Spott's there. It was funny because I saw him. He was with San Jose, and they did a Western rookie camp here, and he was up in San Jose. And I'm like, "Oh, Spotter, how's it going?" He goes, "Are you here now?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Let's get together. I don't know anybody." I'm like, "Cool." And then it was like literally, I think it might have been 12 games in, and they got let go. And then DeBoer got picked up, and I was texting him like, "So you going to Vegas?" Because they've always been together since Kitchener, right? Like,
yeah.
It's like they're two peas in a pod, like a great fit there, like very loyal between a lot of loyalty between the two of them. And that's just fit very well. I think they fit very well to that organization. So,
well, and some of the other guys there, I'm just looking at your list that you pulled up, and like Ryan Craig and Ryan Mcgill are both. Ryan Craig is maybe one of the greatest Brandon Weeking captains of all time, and Mcgill was a coach in our league, in the Western League, for many, many years. So there's a lot of Western connection there, and then Von Karpen on the scouting side as well. Trying to think of.
I had no idea he played that many NHL games.
Craig?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually shocked. I don't even remember him. That's kind of crazy.
Most of his year in the American League, but he was, in my opinion, he was one of those guys in the American League that every team wanted to have because he's such a good leader. So I know he was very well liked as a teammate and a person off the ice too.
Wow, that's kind of crazy. I usually know everybody, and I'm just like kind of surprised how many games he did play for them. And he had some points. I mean, he had 28 points in 48 games, 14 goals, 27 and 72. Like, he had a cup of coffee.
Yeah, he had a pretty good career, and I think it was I can't speak for him obviously, but I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision for him to hang up his skates a couple of years back, but
it's worked out.
I knew that it wouldn't take long for him to get into the coaching side, because I know Kelly always spoke very highly of him, even before, while he was still playing pro. So it didn't surprise me that he's now involved with Kelly in Vegas as well. And then some of the other guys there, like Von Karpen, has ties with Brandon. Bob Lowe's was coach in Brandon for many years in the early mid-90s. So they every time I bump into them, it's always kind of interesting to go back over some of the days back then. So,
well, I just remember I sent a Hail Mary, like probably everybody else, and just inquired before they became a team. I'm like, is there any opportunity to talk about? And the one thing I always remember was that George McPhee, like, personally responded to me. And
yeah,
when I see him, like, he's very personable. Like, he always remembers.
Yeah, I have a lot of time for that. That's one thing actually Kelly's always been good with too, getting back, and that's one of the key things that Alvin, our director of player personnel in Everett, Alvin Backus, has taught me, and it doesn't matter if it's somebody that's just starting or somebody that's been involved for 30 plus years. You always want to make sure you're connecting and reaching out and touching base with those people, because you want to keep people involved in this game. The game keeps changing. Oops, sorry about that. The game keeps changing, and it's evolves and everything else, and the costs of it are getting something that's going to have to get dealt with here, I think, over the next number of years. And you want to keep people involved and on the scouting side, on the coaching side, and not have them give back after their playing days or whatever the case is, or even if they haven't played, they just want to get involved. Like, those are the people you want. And there's so many aspects of hockey now, like the video stuff we talked about a little bit before. Yeah. Like, I am blown away by some of that.
It's pretty impressive now.
Yeah, some of that stuff that I've learned over the last couple of years, and especially over the last year when you're sitting at home a little more. It's unbelievable, some of the programs that are out there and how much you can learn from that. So there's all kinds of tools and connections, I feel, are everything in hockey. It's really how I got into scouting in the first place. So it's so important to have your connections and try and stay in touch with the people that you have a lot of time for and have a lot of time for you. And that's one thing I've always tried to do over the years.
We have a question. Anthony, thank you for your question. He says, Mr. Fraser, do you prefer using analytics when it comes to skating, or do you like the old-fashioned way of scouting where it's purely an eye test and game tape?
Good question. I probably a little bit of both. I think my way is maybe more of an old school way where I definitely would like to see somebody in person. But the analytics thing, and that's maybe goes to what we were just talking about, how the game's evolved and changed, and it's really exploded over the last, however, 10, 15 years, maybe even more than that. But it's unbelievable how much information there is out there now, and even not just at the pro level. Like, there's even getting to be a lot of that type of information at the junior and even some minor hockey levels. So to answer your question, I definitely will take any information I can get. I still find personally that the eye test is maybe what I feel the most comfortable with. But like I said earlier, sometimes it's hard. I can't be everywhere. So having those analytics, having the game tape, definitely comes in handy and definitely is a useful tool.
I find I think it's just part of the equation for me, Anthony. I'm like, I take a lot of, I kind of listen to what people say about other people too, and you got to kind of treat that with a grain of salt. But there's hints there, so it's like you like that holistic view. I want to assess what I'm seeing there, but I also kind of like to get the feedback from people. And sometimes you get to judge who it's coming from, but it's interesting to take it into consideration and understand, how does this guy going to fit in the future. And I don't think you can get that from video, or you can't get that from stats. But
no, and I mean, as you know, like with a lot of the work we do, especially as you get closer to the draft, and when you start narrowing down the list of players that you're interested in, you want to find out as much information as you can about them. We talked about some of the skills and what you want to find in a player and everything else, but what's also as important is you want to find good people. You want to find people that are gonna fit in with your program, fit in the community, which I think, shameless self plug here, Gary Davidson is really good with, getting the players involved in the community and Everett and everything else.
I'd agree with that.
And Coach Williams as well. So I think that's just as important. And, the key thing is when you get to draft day, for me, I really feel like a lot of people always ask if you're nervous, and everything else. And yeah, you're always a little bit nervous, but I think you're more relieved in the sense that you're at the point now where you've done everything that you can do and every discussion you can have, and all your phone calls and everything else, and all the work that everybody's put in is done. It's all together and it's there. So you just have to believe in your work and believe in the effort that everybody's put in. But yeah, it's so important to try and find out as much as you can about the players, not just on but off the ice.
Anthony had a second question, which was, as a scout, do you think the older generation of scouts who are purely focused just on game tape and eye test and refuse to use analytics are getting phased out?
I'm not sure if they're getting phased out. The one thing I will say is that if you don't adapt, you can become, maybe irrelevance too harsh of a term, but you can become kind of a part of that phase out. Sometimes you might not like the way the game has changed or the game has evolved in so many different so many different facets, really. But if you don't adapt to that, you're just going to end up falling behind. Last time I played a significant hockey game was, oh boy, I'm going to age myself here, but I guess about 18 years ago now. And even since then, and even since I started scouting, the game has changed a ton.
It's crazy the skill level that I see.
And really at every level.
Every level.
Not just NHL, not just junior hockey. Like, the game's changed a lot. It's evolved. There's a lot more coaching. There's a lot more analytics, all that type of stuff. So if you don't adapt to that and you don't accept it, it can really put you on the able.
I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me. And Anthony, I would say that for me, it's the same thing, which is there's guys that cling to nostalgia and they're looking for a certain type of player. They're evaluating it based upon a type of game that doesn't exist anymore, or their team is stuck in that old model and they can't compete and they wonder why. They're looking for guys that are big. They just want toughness and they don't value toughness in the context of anything else. And I think those are the guys, more than using tools like analytics are useful to an extent. I think the analytics for me are more about coaching a little bit even. I think the one thing that analytics have brought in, Anthony, are new fans. I think it's a new type of fan.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree.
Last question from Anthony here. Who's the one player since you've been head scout at Everett, and I'm going to laugh at this, that you regretted not drafting in the first round?
Well, that is the easy answer.
We trade them all the time.
That is a good question, but it is an easy answer for me because I've only gone through 2 drafts and I haven't had a first round pick yet. So as a head scout, but yeah, it's interesting that everybody puts different value on the draft and the picks, and really, like I said, once we get to draft day, it's not even really, oh, I shouldn't have passed on him, because really our list is our list. So we really don't defer from our list too much, other than maybe saying, you know what, we should probably take a D-man here over a forward or whatever the case might be. But other than that, it's, when our list is set, it's set, and we don't really sway too far from it once the draft comes around.
So yeah, I'm trying to find, I don't know if I have to log in to see it, but yeah, it's just our roster. If you look at our draft, Anthony, we've been a very, very competitive team. And as a result, when it comes to the playoffs, we tend to have our picks traded so that we can acquire more older guys and keep competing. And it's been fine because we managed to somehow, I think it's a real credit. I think I'll echo what Mike says. Every time I'm with Alvin, every time I'm with Gary, and every time I'm with our scouts, I learn so much. It's like you're in this environment of guys that really understand the game, and it's not about the tools that they use. It's just, they're all, first of all, good people, and I think everyone just wants to find good players, and then everyone kind of sings from the same page as far as what not exactly what you're looking for, but it's exciting to see other guys excited about guys and then stumping for them, like trying to advocate for them. And it kind of gives you a different perspective. Like you have fun arguing with them, but in the end, you kind of like listen to them too.
Yeah, some of the meetings can get a little intense sometimes, but I mean, in the end, everybody knows that we're all trying to do the same thing, right? We're trying to succeed as a franchise and pick the best players that are going to make us better as a franchise. So it's great. I like the heavy dialogue in the meetings. I mean, I don't mean that you should be fighting and everything else with each other, but it's good. The biggest thing with scouting is to have an opinion. Sitting there in a meeting, and if you agree or disagree on something, make sure you speak up, because it's that's everything, not just to you in terms of your own development, but for the program and for the franchise.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I guess I don't know why I don't see our 2020 draft. I mean, Ben was a third pick. He looks great. We're seeing Austin come through. I think he's going to be real good. I have a feeling this guy ain't ever going to come, but he's very talented. This guy's panned out. He's signed. So it's going to be interesting. Or is it Evan May? Do we have Mills and May both signed?
Evan May Evan May's signed right now. He's on the roster right now.
It is Evan. Okay. I was like, wait, is it Mills or May? It's interesting though. We also traded some guys that are having a ton of success. It's going back a little bit, but it's funny when you see guys and you're like, oh man, if we only still had that guy. But you got assets like Brent Kemp's doing real well.
Yeah, and that's common in junior hockey. I mean, you've seen everywhere. And if I remember right, the year that Everett traded Centazzo, I mean, Everett was making a run for the league championship.
Exactly.
And Centazzo was a young prospect then, so
he was very young, but he's really panned out. So it was like, somebody got a good player there. Last year, Anthony was also, and for anyone that's watching, was the first time that we ever had a U.S. only draft, and we had 2 rounds. So it was that was kind of interesting for me, because it gave you. I don't know if it was the best year for U.S. players, but it was still interesting to kind of separate them out and kind of rank them against each other. I don't get to see the Canadian guys personally anymore. Like I don't get up there for the Western guys. So for me, that was kind of interesting. I don't have to wait till the 4th round for someone to get picked. So. Hey, Mike, I want to thank you for joining me. I don't want to take up too much of your time. If I could grant you one wish in the whole world, what would it be?
To get back to the rink. It's time. We're
ready.
Hopefully we can get over this pandemic here soon and get everybody back and doing what we all love. So it's I feel bad for the kids, especially up here. Missing out on this season has been just crazy for everybody. So it's want to get them back on the ice for their sake and their health and their mental health and everything else, and for myself too, for my health and my mental health, and watch some hockey again.
Let the kids play. Stop being stupid.
Yeah. So hopefully we can get over this here soon. Maybe in the fall we can have a somewhat normal season, or at least get things rolling and get back to some type of normalcy, whatever that is now.
We're gonna find out. Thanks so much, Mike. It's been fun. Come back anytime. We got to put a good word in now. We got to figure out how to get Alvin on this.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, I don't think he's avoiding me, actually.
Yeah, that might be tough, but if you ever do, it'll be a good show, because he is
I'm like,
he's a wealth of knowledge, and he's an awesome guy. So
he's an awesome guy.
A lot from him in 2.5 years.
Well, actually, one idea might be, and I was thinking of this, we should get a bunch of the scouts on at once.
Yeah.
We should watch a game and get a bunch of the scouts. All right, Mike, have a great night. Thank you so much.
We might all yap at each other too much, so
that'll be part of the fun. All right, thanks so much, Mike. And this has been another episode, a late night episode of Pucks and Dreams on Hockey Nation. We will see you Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And Coach Frenchie, I think, is still doing the Montreal Canadiens broadcast. So you can always go over and get his hot take on things.